The purpose of this video is to explain and then demo the installation and configuration of the connector framework, an external software component provided by Broadcom to support some of the scheduler integrations such as atomic automation or Control-M. The purpose of this course isn't to teach every type of integration since there are so many. They're taught separately in dedicated courses. We show the connector framework deployed with Atomic in order to have a fully deployed system, which will make teaching the rest of the material easier. If you're not an Atomic user, we strongly recommend searching our learning catalog for the integration specific to your infrastructure and then taking that as well. Once we've established that the connector is working, we configure an Atomic automation connection in the AAI web UI. The system connects to the Atomic REST API and acquires definition and event data. For this video, we have three systems. Atomic automation has been deployed and is running entirely independently from the AAI infrastructure. We installed AAI on a dedicated system in one of the previous modules. We have a third system, a Windows host, on which we install the connector framework components. First, we'll perform the installation using the executable AAI should be started. At install, we're prompted to configure the connection to the AAI server. We provide several values which will be used to populate a file called application.yaml. When the connector is started, it uses values from application.yaml to establish the connection to AAI. If your values are wrong, it's not a big deal. You can just fix them and then restart the connector. We'll check the log and make sure that the connection is established. Then we log into AAI and create the scheduler connection to Atomic automation in the web UI. Various data points, such as Atomic's REST API web UI URLs are required, along with user and password for each, so that the connector can acquire the data from Atomic. Let's run through the procedure. First, make sure that AAI is running. For this, simply check the Windows service. Then, download the framework from the Atomic Downloads website. Look for terms like distributed and integration. Unzip the file and run the executable. At the end of the installation, you're prompted for the values that go into the application.yaml file. Don't worry if your values are inaccurate because you're going to update the YAML file manually afterwards. The file system is created along with the log file. Update the YAML file with the right configuration information for the AAI instance and the name of the connector. You can restart the service. The log shows the connector talking to AAI and is not finding a defined integration, which is normal. We do that next. Connect to the AAI web interface and set up the connection to the scheduler with the Atomic system name, the web interface and REST API URLs, the client and client user. Use the log. It's the best way to understand what issues you're having. Before deploying the Atomic connector framework, make sure you log into client 0 in Atomic and check that the variable execution trigger is enabled in UC system settings. We go through the usual motions of unzipping the relevant package. We're in the My Documents folder. The zip file is there and we've unzipped it, which has created the Atomic connector.exe. We execute it. You have to specify the directory of the connector. We create a Start Menu folder for the connector. This initiates a dialog so that you can provide the values that are added to application.yaml. We have to enter the AAI server URI, in other words, the address where the AAI web server can be reached. We're not going to cover TLS deployments, which are explained in their own module. So we enter the HTTP address with the AAI web server hostname and port 8080. The connector name is arbitrary, you choose it. Enter the hostname where the connector is being installed. We enter the admin ID and password, which we use to log into the AAI web UI. By default, this is admin and password in lowercase. The domain is JAWS. Provide the path to the logs directory. By default, the directory is called logs and is placed in the connector package directory. Provide sizing and rotation values. You can always adjust these later on based on data volumes processed by the connector. The setup was successful. The connector is able to communicate with AAI. If you get an error message, you'll need to update application.yaml manually. We'll show how to do this in a minute. A new Windows service has been created. It's set to start automatically at boots. We notice two files of specific interest in the file system. One is the application.yaml file, where we configure the connector and connection to the AI server. The other is the log. Let's check the log first. The connector started successfully. Let's assume you're getting errors. You need to configure application.yaml manually. Let's show this now. Here are the elements. For the AI server, we have the URL, the username, the password, and the domain. For the connector itself, we have the name of the connector and the hostname. Then we restart the service for these changes to take effect. The connector is talking to AAI. Now we need to source data from Atomic Automation via the REST API. For this, we create a new object in AAI, which is a scheduler connection that uses the connector we created in application.yaml. You can call that connection anything you want, but we recommend referencing the scheduler type, say Atomic, so that you can differentiate from other kinds. In the preliminary screen, we name our scheduler connection and specify the scheduler type, in our case, Atomic Automation. We give the connection a name, which is your choice. We select the connector that we created when we defined it in the application.yaml file. Then we need to specify the Atomic system name. For Atomic Automation users, this is the system name as defined in the automation engine's ucsrv.ini file. Then we add the URL to the Atomic REST API and the client whose data we want to use in AAI. Remember, you need a dedicated connection per client. We also specify the user with privileges to the REST API in that client. If you're not sure what to use, it's a safe bet that the ID you use to log into AWI will work here. We also need the AWI URL. You're currently set up with a once-a-day acquisition of definition data. If you'd like to increase this, simply check the boxes that you need. If you check the REST API debug function, you will generate a log of the REST API outputs. The projected start time period determines how far in the future you want to go in collecting forecasted jobs. The default is set to 7 days, which is acceptable. The polling interval is set to 30 seconds by default, which is low enough to keep Atomic and AAI in sync without impacting performance. AAI will wait 5 minutes by default before giving up on polling the API in the event of a no response and 2 minutes to retry the acquisition of the definition data. The connection is established. The connector needs time to process the data currently in the scheduler and import it into AAI. This can take several minutes, and the switch may remain red for a while. No need to panic. As long as the log showed a successful connection, this will happen when AAI is caught up. Eventually, the switch turns green. As long as your elements are correct, the connection will be established after a few minutes. If you want to see the connection go active and atomic automation is quiet, run a dummy job. This will activate the connector. To establish with certainty that your connection is valid, check the log. In order to uninstall the connector, run the uninstaller executable in the root directory of the connector. This will stop the Windows service and then perform the uninstall. You can then delete the directory.